Welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. Thanks for joining us. Looks like we've got a good group logging in. I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Just give it a couple minutes here while everyone gets logged in. Thanks again. If we were in person, just imagine there would be snacks and chit chat happening. I do miss our snacks. It's good to see everyone joining. Especially on such a nice, beautiful spring evening. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes. See a couple people still logging on. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you again, everyone, for joining our webinar tonight. I'm Laura Ellsworth, Strategic Partnerships and Advocacy Manager with Council for the Homeless, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm so pleased to see such a big audience tonight, which also tells me that we're all feeling a little confused and overwhelmed about all the seemingly fast-moving changes, assistance, and policy that's occurring right now as we're moving into this next phase of springtime and the evolution of the pandemic. So hopefully tonight we can talk about some of this and clear some of the information up with folks. I have just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. The only people that you will see and hear tonight are the panelists. So relax, enjoy a nice beverage or a snack, cuddle up with a pet or a kid, and enjoy. You are not on camera. We would also like to answer as many questions as we can tonight and have built in some extra time, a little more time than normal. So please do post questions in the Q&A section. In order to keep questions from being lost in the chat box, which tends to happen as more messages get posted and the scroll moves really quickly, we actually disabled the chat function for attendees so that all questions can be placed into the Q&A. However, important links and phone numbers will be shared throughout tonight's presentation in the chat by panelists and co-hosts, so please do keep an eye on that. And we're going to post a recording of this webinar on our website and send it out within the next week. So here's a look at our agenda for tonight. We're playing things a little bit by ear. We've been lucky enough to have Representative Monica Stonier kindly agree to jump on tonight if she can, as soon as she's done with legislative business, and timing is never guaranteed, but this is the general plan, so we'll go with it and we'll improvise if needed. We'll end the webinar with some calls to action, so please stay tuned for that. So let's get into it. A lot has happened since our last webinar. Vaccines, reopenings, declining COVID cases, a slight uptick in COVID cases, federal stimulus funds, all the while the Washington State Legislature has been hearing and voting on legislation and budgets for housing and homelessness services, protections, and solutions. I have some updates to share with you regarding specific bills that we discussed last month. First, I want to share that Senate Bill 5160, which is the legal protections for tenants facing eviction, has passed in the Senate. And its hearing is scheduled in the House Appropriations Committee actually tomorrow, March 31st. And there is an opportunity to sign in pro. As some of you who attended our last webinar might remember, because of the virtual legislative session that we're in, we do have an opportunity to weigh in on bills and budget proposals from the comfort of our home any time of day or night. So John, one of our panelists tonight, is going to actually post a link about how to do that in the chat. And then he can also help walk us through that a little bit later tonight as well. So you can always sign in and register your support for that bill tonight. And if it passes appropriations tomorrow, it will go to the full House for a vote. And remember, it's already passed the Senate. So if it passes the House and then it goes to the governor to be signed and to become law. Yay. Another good news, House Bill 1277. This is the document recording fee increase of $100 that would help fund prevention and permanent supportive housing, homelessness prevention and permanent supportive housing in a long-term and stable way, has also passed in the House. Next step is a vote in the Senate. So that's moving along and looking good. House Bill 1236, which is the bill that requires legitimate business reasons for eviction, has passed the House. And in the Senate, it's on its way. It passed out of a committee on a 5-4 vote with no significant amendments. This has actually been hard fought and pretty incredible. Advocates from across the state really stepped up in the last week to share their stories and contact their lawmakers. And as we know, advocacy works. So next stop for 1236, it's now queued up for a final vote on the Senate floor. And if it passes there, it goes to the governor for his signature. And then finally, 5139, Senate Bill 5139, which would have limited rent increases after the moratorium on evictions ends, unfortunately is dead for this session. It never made it out of its committee of origin. And this is extremely unfortunate because we are already hearing about notifications of rent increases going out and plans for increases as soon as legally possible once the eviction moratorium ends. So that's where we are legislatively. On the financial side of things, our budget priorities remain the same. And as a reminder, here are the original goals that we had this year for the budget. A significant investment into the Housing Trust Fund of $250 million, $37 million for permanent supportive housing, which is projects like the Elwood that just opened here a week or so ago. And it's the type of housing that individuals who are chronically homeless move into. The document recording fee increase of $100, which we just talked about. Expanded emergency shelter capacity like Bertha's Place over by the mall that's expected to open later this year. Additional important considerations like preserving existing affordable housing that is set to expire, and no cuts to the HEN program or to other social services that we've just fought so hard for in recent years. So both the Senate and the House released their operating and capital budgets in recent days. This is kind of the latest development as far as what's happening in the legislature. And as a reminder, the capital budget is for improvements of capital assets, such as land and buildings and facility improvements. And it tends to be more long-term, and it's included in an appropriations bill for a specific biennium, which is what they're working on right now. The operating budget is the 2-year plan for revenues and expenditures necessary to support administrative and service functions of government. And that tends to be what most of us think about when we think about budgeting. Both budgets, however, do pertain to different aspects for funding for housing and homelessness solutions. So I'd like to be able to tell you that one chamber has the ideal proposal over the other and that we just need to advocate for that one. But of course, it's so much more complicated than that. In a very basic nutshell, the House operating budget is visionary and it's responding to the current crisis that we're in. It's focused on quickly dedicating historic levels of resources to match the historic level of need in this unprecedented time. And for example, the House operating budget has over $1 billion in rental assistance, and the Senate operating budget doesn't come close to that. However, the Senate operating budget also shines in ways that the House operating budget does not. It funds some good things like Senate Bill 5160, but overall, compared to the House's operating budget, the Senate's doesn't convey the same sense of urgency. And then as far as the capital budget goes, the Senate's is better. And the funding for affordable housing is similar between the two, but the way that the Senate set up their budget is exceptionally good in that they set aside $205 million for the Housing Trust Fund. And remember, that was the one where we wanted 250, but 205 is no slouch. And $90 million for rapid acquisition for emergency shelter, which far outweighs the House's proposal. So that being said, the House capital budget does things that the Senate's doesn't, like shelter capacity grants and funding for protecting expiring affordable housing, which is not in the Senate budget, which would allow existing affordable housing to expire and put people like low-income seniors at risk of losing their affordable housing that they've been in for a long time. And some of you might recall that just prior to the pandemic, seniors experiencing homelessness was the most rapidly rising group of people. So all of this reminds me of the Friends episode where all the individual pieces of Rachel's trifle are good, but when put all together into one dish, not so much. So as you can see, between the two chambers, the budget proposals in the House and the Senate, and between the two budget categories, the operating and the capital, each side has its strengths and deficits. And in the last weeks of the session, it will be our job to pick out the best pieces and put them together and advocate for them in a way that will make the best impact for housing and homelessness policy in our state. So what's next for these budgets? Well, they've already had their public hearings and they will pass out of their corresponding committees this week. And then they will then go to both of their chambers, the House and the Senate, where they will get passed. And then that is where the budget negotiations truly begin. It's called conference. And this is where the negotiations, compromises, and prioritizations get formalized. So once all that is done, each chamber will vote again, usually at the very end of the legislative session, and pass on an agreed upon between the two sides final budget. And that will be for the next biennium. So stay tuned for more ways to get involved with advocacy around the budget in the next couple of weeks. Up to this point, we've really been focused on the bills. That's going to start shifting more towards the budget, and there'll definitely be some guidance coming around that. I know it sounds complicated, and it is, but John and I will do our best to simplify and narrow down our advocacy messaging for you all to take action. And I do want to take a quick moment to recognize our local legislators who cast yes votes to help advance the legislative priorities that we've discussed tonight. My colleague Brenda will post their emails and phone numbers in the chat. Please feel free to email or call them to say thank you for voting yes on housing and homelessness solutions, and stay tuned for more opportunities to contact them over the next few weeks. You might actually want to program your phones with these phone numbers. So Brenda, can you please post that information in the chat for folks? And don't worry too, if there's any technical difficulties with any of this, we will be sure to send out this information in our follow-up email to everybody. So now I'd like to introduce Jesse Anderson from Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program to talk to us about the most recent eviction moratorium extension. This could be the final one. We don't know, but it will last through June 30th of 2021. So Jesse's here to tell us if there are any changes to the previous moratoriums with this one, and share some key points that people should know as we navigate through the next few months of the pandemic. She's also going to share a little bit of preliminary information about how Senate Bill 5160 might work if it is passed. And of course, keep in mind, this is all pending information. We're kind of making the best guesses and informed information sharing that we can give you at this moment in time, recognizing that the only thing about the legislative session that's consistent is that it always changes. So Brenda's gonna hopefully post the eviction moratorium one-pager info into the chat for folks to take a look at. We do have 3 languages available in English, Spanish, and Chuukese. And Jesse, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to share my screen here. Thanks everybody for being here. I've probably spoken with most of you at different webinars over the course of the last year. So let's just have a spring check-in on where we are now. We're going to talk just briefly about the federal extension, the Washington moratorium extension, what our office is seeing right now with folks' ability to pay rent, the eviction resolution program, and what we can sort of look towards with Bill 5160. So first, just yesterday, the federal CDC eviction moratorium was extended. It's been extended until June 30th, 2021. So that is very convenient for us here in Washington. It all wraps up the same day for right now. Something that is noteworthy this time around is that the FTC and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau will be taking complaints directly from tenants who are having issues with debt collectors coming after them for past due rent. And they've said that this will include complaints about attorneys who are trying to evict them against state or federal moratorium. The information for the CFPB is here, and they've got a complaint process online and a phone number that can be called. I wanted to briefly mention that the Washington Supreme Court has taken up a case. We are anticipating that it will probably be heard sometime in May, late May, about the 60-day notices that tenants have received. So most of us know at this point that in Washington, you can still be evicted if there's a safety or a health issue. You can also still be evicted if a tenant has received a 60-day notice that their landlord or property owner intends to live in the property or to sell it. Statewide, there's been different ways that tenant advocate attorneys are trying to fight this. Multiple offices, multiple civil legal aid offices, such as NJP, have taken some of these cases and applied for stays of the eviction paperwork, and the Supreme Court has granted some of those stays pending the outcome of this case. And what they'll be talking about and deciding is whether the federal moratorium makes it so that these 60-day notices aren't good in Washington, even though the Washington moratorium allows for it. So it will be really interesting and something that we should all watch for to see how the court decides that issue. That is definitely the #1 call that we're getting from tenants still. We're not seeing so many safety issues happening at this point. Most of it is people who have gotten 60-day notices. So it'll be really important to keep a watch on that case. In order for tenants to take advantage of the federal moratorium, they do have to be proactive about providing a declaration to their landlord. There's an updated declaration that has been put out at this link, and I can send my PowerPoint to Laura and she can forward it around, and that way people will have these links and contact information. It's very easy. It walks you right through. In fact, I can probably click on it. It's just a 2-page. It's very user-friendly. People will look at it and see, do they meet one of these requirements in column A? Do they meet a requirement in column B? If so, they probably qualify. And then the second page is the declaration, and they can read through it and check these as they apply and sign at the bottom. We always make sure to remind people to read this, that they're signing it under penalty of perjury, and that has implications for them. And then this form needs to be provided to their landlord. Let's see if I can get back. There we go. So our best advice for tenants and what would really help us out in providing them access to legal information is, as soon as somebody gets a 60-day notice, to call into us or the Clear Housing Line or Northwest Justice Project. What happens very often is that people call in and say, I got a 60-day notice and now I've been served documents and I'm supposed to be in court on Friday. And that causes everybody involved to scramble to try to find a volunteer attorney that is available to jump in on something like that. So any person that you're talking to that receives a notice like that, getting them hooked up with us as soon as possible will really help. We have had a lot of good chances to make agreements with landlords, and we've kept a lot of tenants in their property just by working back and forth with our volunteers and the landlords. So the Washington State Eviction Moratorium has also been extended till June 30th. There really were no huge significant changes this time around. There was some clarity and elaboration for instances where people are living in the property, but they're not on the lease. Somebody's brother moved in with them and the leaseholder has since moved out and the brother's still in there. And it just kind of clarified what we had already been telling people, you know, if there's something going on where you have the person who moved in and it's not on the lease has created a landlord-tenant relationship by paying rent and it's been accepted or it's been acknowledged that there's a rental relationship there, then their person probably has the same protections of the moratorium. That would be a situation, and we are seeing some of those come through right now. And so that would be a situation to get somebody hooked up with civil legal aid as soon as possible as well. This one pager is available on our website, and I believe that it's also in Russian at this point too. I think that we've got at least 4 languages currently ready to go on there. Paying rent right now, I wanted to just share some good news. A lot of us hear a lot of bad news all day, and so we have talked to quite a few tenants over the last couple weeks who have been able to use some of the stimulus money that came out, as well as some tax return money, to pay off what they owed or reach agreements with their landlords. And so that's been really encouraging, and we definitely encourage people to use that money when they can. People have a lot of other bills and debts that have racked up, and so it's not always possible to apply every bit of it that comes in towards past rent. I want to point out, and we'll get to this with the eviction resolution program, but if somebody has got questions about how they should go about making these arrangements with their landlord, they can always be encouraged to contact us or the Clear Line, and we have attorneys who are willing to talk with them about how to negotiate with their landlord and what kind of payment agreement they can make. Also, public utility assistance is available. It can be accessed by this website, this hyperlink on here. And we have been getting lots and lots of calls about the TRAP program. I know Sunny's going to talk about that in a few moments, and so I won't go into it too much at this point. The eviction resolution program in Clark County General Order 2018 requires landlords to send eviction resolution program notices and to participate in good faith prior to filing an eviction. This is something that they can do right now during the moratorium. They do not have to wait until the moratorium's over. And so a lot of tenants are getting these notices right now. The ERP program is voluntary for tenants. They do not have to do it. But they do have to opt in if they want to participate. So they can opt in by filling out the notice and returning it to their landlord. We always like to encourage people to take a copy of it and keep a copy for themselves. We talk to a lot of people weekly who have barriers technology-wise to getting these notices back. And so if somebody has a barrier or you're working with somebody with barriers, feel free to reach out to us and we can facilitate getting these notices turned in. A tenant can also request help from CMS's Community Mediation Services. They're our dispute resolution center in Clark County. They can request help from them without waiting for the landlord to give them a notice. And they can do that by contacting us or by contacting Community Mediation Services directly. There's a lot of confusion out there in the community about what this program is. Resolution Washington has made a really nice 2.5-minute video. It's easy to digest. It's short enough to keep people's attention, and we've housed it on our website, ccvlp.org, and then you scroll get help, eviction resources, and there's a really nice video. I would really encourage anybody that's talking to somebody that doesn't understand what this program is to check that video out. It answers a lot of questions in 2.5 minutes and really gives people a good basis to start from. Some problems that we're currently seeing with this program is that the tenant gets the notice from their landlord. They don't know what it is, whether to opt in or how to opt in, and so they don't do anything. And that's very problematic. We don't want people procrastinating. There are time requirements on these notices, and so tenant, if they want to engage, does need to take action when they get the notice. Another problem that we get is tenant gets the notice, they turn the notice into their landlord, and what that prompts is the landlord to send them an email or a communication with a proposed repayment plan, and the terms of that proposed repayment plan feel extremely overwhelming and scary, and the tenant freezes because it seems undoable and they don't know where to go from there. This is the opportunity for the tenant to call in to help from us. They can also seek help from CMS directly. We have attorneys and there are eviction resolution specialists at CMS who can talk to folks and help them in some financial counseling, can help them try to get hooked up with rental assistance, and can help them craft a repayment plan for them to propose to their landlord. It shouldn't be just a communication where they get something very scary from their landlord and that's it and it's over. They do not have to accept what comes from them, and they absolutely can make a counter offer. So Bill 5160, and the ERT program is in this too, so we might double cover a little bit. We've all kind of touched on so far. This is not a done deal yet. We feel very, very encouraged, and there's a lot of support for it. And so we think that it will be likely to turn into law. I really hate to provide too much community education on something that hasn't become finalized yet. But having said that, some important things to know that are in there and to watch for. There is a difference in this bill if it gets passed the way that it's currently written, that we've all kind of gotten used to in Washington, somebody that lives in a hotel or motel needed to be there for 14 days. That's different in this Bill 5160. The person needed to be there for 30 days prior to March 1st of last year. And so we want to make sure everybody knows about that change and doesn't get tripped up on that. It lays out very specifically what sort of things the landlord cannot consider when deciding whether to rent a place to the tenant. They cannot take into account payment for rent that came due between March 1st and the end of the emergency. They can't consider that as a factor, whether to rent to somebody or not. They cannot take into account somebody's medical history. They can't require medical records or use that as a condition. And we have seen that over the last year. And so I imagine that we will continue to see it. They cannot ask for or require late fees from March 1st to the end of the emergency. There is some big time teeth built into this law if it passes as it's currently written. A landlord who does this, the court, it is stated that the court shall penalize them essentially 4.5 times the monthly rental rate plus cost and attorney's fees. They really want this sort of stuff to not happen. Repayment plans are built into this law should it pass. Repayment plans shall be offered. The tenant has 14 days to respond, and so timeliness is going to be very important as the moratorium lifts. It sort of lays out that the payment plan should be 1/3 of the rent during the period of accumulated debt. I wanted to alert everybody to a problem that we're currently and already seeing. Some people are reading this to mean that you take the entire amount that they didn't pay for the last year, and it's a third of that amount. So essentially it's paid off in 3 months. That's not how I personally interpret this. I don't think that that was the intent. And I think that there's very good arguments that that's not the way that it should be interpreted. But be aware in case you see it and think, what's going on? I don't understand what's happening. Payment plans can't be required to start until 30 days after the time that it was offered. And there's prohibitions on certain conditions being included in those offered repayment plans. The eviction resolution program is written into this law, and so it will likely be something that we'll see in more than just the 6 pilot counties. And right to counsel, this is the big one I wanted to at least start throwing out there so people are familiar. This law would create a right to counsel for tenants who are deemed indigent and facing eviction. There are a lot of unknowns with this program and how it's going to end up running. If passed, the Office of Civil Legal Aid has 90 days from the date that the governor signs it to present a plan for how to fully implement the program within 12 months. Tenants, like I said, must be deemed indigent, and it prioritizes counties with where evictions are most likely to occur. So there's lots of unknowns in how this will be structured. This has not been done anywhere else in the country, and it's a huge ask to get it set up so quickly. There were probably going to be a lot more information coming as we sort of figure out what this looks like and what it would mean in Clark County as far as who would house these attorneys, how they would be chosen, and how they could be accessed. The bill also includes a lot of information on the Landlord Mitigation Fund. So there's also information in that bill for landlords and landlords attorneys who'd like to check it out. And this is our contact information in case anybody needs it and doesn't have it yet. Oh, there we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessie. Hey, what does indigent mean?
Indigency is how the court defines a person, and it can differ based on differing programs that they're looking at. So for right to counsel, in order to be considered indigent, a person's income has to be below 2% of the federal poverty level, or they receive particular services or benefits.
Great. All right. And please do, I saw a question come in for Jessie, so we will we'll address those during our Q&A. So please, if you have questions after that, post them in the Q&A, and we'll be doing that next, or once we hear from the rest of our panelists. All right, so now I would like to introduce my colleague here at Council for the Homeless, Sunny Wonder. Sunny and her team are working hard to help get rental assistance funds out into the community. It's probably something you've been hearing about recently, that there have been funds that have come in, there's more to come. And so her team really helped get that first round of rental assistance funds out to the folks in our community over the summer. And then the next round of assistance actually just opened up today. So everyone, please thank Sunny and her team so much for not only dealing with all of that madness today, but also jumping on here tonight to assist with helping to get the word out even more. I have unending gratitude for that. So things that we did not know would all be happening on the same day when we planned this. And then of course, we opened up some assistance today. And then, as you might know, then the American Rescue Plan was passed in January that the Biden administration put forth. So there'll be even more coming. But for now, this pertains to what already happened over the summer, and then what was passed at the very end of December of 2020. So as you'll hear from Sunny, though, while this is all really exciting and promising and unprecedented, this amount of rental assistance, which is homelessness prevention, to be clear, is both unprecedented in our community and has not been near enough to meet the need. In Oregon and Washington, the research has been done that shows between 15 and 18% of renters are behind in rent, and that equates to about 30,000 households in Clark County, which is a lot. So Brenda is gonna post a link to our rent assistance flyer in the chat, and Sunny, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. It's good to be here. It's definitely, I know there are a lot of questions in the community of just what does it look like here in Clark County, what's going on, definitely for folks who are struggling with instability, as many folks are, just a lot of fear and concern about what is available, how they get through. We definitely recognize that calling our housing hotline, there have definitely, since we opened up the rental assistance line again today, we have seen definitely some long wait times for folks. We are staffed up and have a lot of folks answering the phones. But as Laura mentioned, definitely what we're seeing here at Council for the Homeless and across the community on the agencies that are providing assistance, there's an overwhelming amount of need. So it's definitely taking some time to get to folks, which can be incredibly stressful. Just a bit of a recap, as Laura mentioned, we have been basically since I think back in May when we first started getting some additional rental assistance dollars, we've just been at a full run getting money out as quickly as possible, and also continuing to recognize that it's not meeting the need. We're seeing, of course, folks that have been in this situation before, so folks who have experienced instability, often in customer service jobs where their jobs have been there and then disappeared and been back again as we kind of go through the fluctuations of the pandemic. There are also many folks that we're seeing who have never been in this situation. So their crisis looks different, but still a lot of incredible stress as they try to find ways to access a system that they never imagined that they would be there at that point. Our goal throughout this process is most definitely to increase access and make the process as thoughtful and accessible as possible. So with the most recent emergency rental assistance dollars, so that's coming from the CARES Act that passed back in May, and then we got the updated funds that passed in December. So we got additional funding that we are spending out right now. And then additional funding that we just got into our community, a sizable amount that is coming from the Treasury Department. So with all of those funds, the funds that we just opened, just to walk you through that process, if you know anyone who's struggling, is behind on their rent, what that process will look like, where you can go for assistance. The folks are definitely the rent assistance flyer. Please go to our website. You can see the rent assistance flyer that walks you through all of the process, kind of what you can expect. I will say with the additional funding that we're gathering starting today as we start to reach out to folks, we are going to be gathering a bit more information. Previously, the funds we were able to move pretty quickly. This process will be a bit more, so we're gathering income documentation and stuff like that. So it will take us a bit longer. The process is going to be a bit longer, but it really is about moving folks through as quickly as possible. We're not going to be asking questions that we don't need to be gathering. We want to make it as easy and thoughtful as possible because we know folks are incredibly stressed. So please do go to the website. We also have this round, we have a portal. So with that, you will see there's a tenant portal and there's a landlord portal. I will say we have seen overwhelming need in the community and in the interest of increasing access for our tenants specifically. The tenant portal is still open, so folks, please direct folks there, particularly folks that may be calling the hotline, they have a job or something like that and they're not able to call and sit on hold. Please encourage folks to reach out to the hotline. On that flyer, you can also see some other access points. So for folks, specific populations, specifically recognizing the pandemic has impacted our marginalized communities much differently. please make sure to check those out because there are some avenues for folks, some other places that folks are able to call. Our burden as the system is to make sure that we're tracking that and making sure, wherever you're able to get assistance, that's wonderful. And we're going to kind of keep track. There's a limit on the number of months that folks are able to get assistance with. So that's something that as a system, we're working really hard together to make sure we're keeping track of that and being really thoughtful and giving transparent, updated information for folks. I think that the portal, I've been monitoring it all day. We've definitely seen a significant number of calls that have come through. I'm estimating about 700 folks have already applied. So just to give you a bit of context of what this day has looked like, it has been very busy and is again a reflection, as Laura mentioned, huge overwhelming amount of need. And it's very clear that there's a need for more funds in our community. So we're excited that we have received funds. It's definitely incredibly needed and we're going to work as quickly as possible. I will say, so within our homeless response system, we have 5 agencies that are going to be working to provide assistance. Ourselves, Share, Janus, Impact, and Lifeline. So there are 5 different agencies that are working as quickly as possible to provide that assistance. But again, there are a couple of other agencies that are providing support as well, kind of outside of our system. So with those, we definitely will see, it appears likely we'll get additional funds coming into the community, which is good news as we continue to see the need. Definitely what we have seen is folks that are still needing assistance. So maybe they were served through previous rounds of assistance and are circling back around because they're still struggling to have consistent employment. So that is a big piece that we're seeing. We're also seeing folks that have been able to hold on and now are at a point where they just aren't able to stretch their money and they haven't seen that increasing income that they were expecting or hoping for. As definitely we're continuing to see impacts on our economy, most definitely at our local level and definitely at the national level as well. But we're definitely seeing that pain for households that are struggling to make decisions on what bills to pay. So we're definitely very excited. There's also the ability to access utility assistance, which is most definitely something that we're needing. We definitely have seen some folks that are making a decision on whether they pay their rent or pay for food or pay their utilities or pay the rent. So making those decisions when you know that there are families that are making those decisions, making sure that we're getting the funds out quickly is most definitely a focus for our team as we staff up and get those funds out the door as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you, Sunny.
Yeah.
We have seen some more questions come in, so thank you for folks who are putting some questions in the Q&A. And next, I am going to turn it over to John Stovall from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. John is here to talk more about advocacy. He's going to share how things have been going this session and give examples of how advocacy has already made a huge difference this legislative session, and how you can get involved during the remainder of this session, which is set to end on April 25th. So, John, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. And you all get to see the results of my COVID hair as well from the picture to now. Anyway, yeah, thank you for having me. This is, I'm really excited to be here to be able to talk to you about advocacy, because the question always for me is sort of like, wow, there's so much that has happened this year. There's so much that's already happened. And I've just gotten a bunch of information about things that are in the works right now. So what can I actually do? Like, what is the next thing for me to do to be able to work towards some of these really big changes that we're talking about, like having the right to counsel in Washington state. Like Jesse said, we would be the first state in the United States to have the right to counsel, meaning tenants all over Washington who are under a certain income level would automatically be assigned a pro bono free legal assistance, free attorney to help them if they're being evicted. How do I help ensure that tenants cannot be discriminated against or retaliated against with 20-day notices just to kick them out really quickly because the landlord has some sort of bias against them. That's something that real people like ourselves are experiencing right now, and that needs to be banned. That cannot continue to be the case. So how can I make that happen? We heard that, like, even though we've gotten so much rental assistance in Washington state from the federal government, it's still not enough. So what can I do to ensure that we can continue to have more rental assistance into the future as our economy recovers slowly? So luckily, there are things that we can do for every single one of those, and I'm going to share some opportunities with you all tonight. But first, I just want to kind of give a little bit of context about the state legislative session, because it has been unique. Not only have we been in a COVID-19 pandemic, but it has been the first legislative session that has been all virtual ever. And so we've all been trying to figure out, like, how does that work logistically? And how do people participate in the democratic process? How do people participate in advocacy when you don't have the opportunity to go to Olympia and meet one-on-one or face-to-face with your lawmakers, or go to Olympia and sort of gather on the steps of the Capitol and make some big noise and things like that? So we really had to be adaptable this year. But some examples of what I've seen where folks have been adaptable and where it's made a huge difference. And I will say, like, generally advocacy does work. Like Laura said, advocacy is what creates the kind of fuel that moves a bill forward. If lawmakers around the state are presented with the idea of a bill from their colleague or from their staff or something like that, and they hear nothing from the constituents in their district about it, they will assume that nobody cares, or that there is mostly, there's potentially mostly opposition to the bill, and that it would be a risk for them to vote yes on it. But that is why we have to be continuously contacting our legislators and letting them know that these bills, to protect people from eviction, to protect people from homelessness, to get people into stable, permanent, affordable housing, to fund more shelter capacity statewide, all these things are priorities, not just for lobbyists, not just for other lawmakers, not for not for just a small number of people, but for our communities. So I will say one thing that's been kind of cool to witness this year is how signing in on a bill during a legislative hearing has become this new game. I mean, I don't want to call it a game. It's real, but it can be kind of like a competitive game. And I get competitive sometimes, especially when it comes to advocacy. And so what this, I guess I'll explain sort of what it is. Whenever a bill has a hearing in a committee, this is not when it gets a vote, but before it gets a vote, it will get a hearing and the public has an opportunity to weigh in. So you can weigh in by either signing in pro on the bill, by submitting written testimony, or by testifying live during the hearing. And if you don't have the time to testify live during the hearing, or you don't have something written that you want to say, you can just basically fill out a quick form and submit it, and you are noted as someone who has supported this bill. And we, on lots of our bills, have gotten over, several hundred, even over 1,000 sign-in pros on these bills. And that is the kind of thing, when you see 1,100 pros and you see 700 cons at the end of the day, and you're checking the numbers throughout the day too, and it's like 400 to 500 and 600 to 550, and then that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think that's exciting. So so that's one way that I'm actually going to ask you all to take action tonight, because Senate Bill 5160, like Laura said, has a hearing tomorrow in the House Appropriations Committee. And we have the opportunity between now and 1 hour before the hearing tomorrow, so between now and 12:30, to get as many sign-in pros as possible on that bill. And I think I checked earlier today, and we are up, but you never know. At the last minute, it could totally flip. And so I'm going to ask you all right now to sign in pro on 5160. And if you did it earlier, that is great. That's excellent. But I'm going to put the link in the chat again. See if I can do this right. Okay. So here is the link. If you click on that, it'll take you to a page. You click. Oh yeah, great. Thank you, Laura. So let's say you've just clicked on this. So under position, you're going to select pro. You can choose pro, con, or other. And then if you scroll down, you basically fill out all this information. Almost all of it is is required, but when you get to the address line, like I just want everyone to know that the information that you include here is publicly disclosable, meaning if someone wanted to request all the information on everyone who signed in pro on a certain bill, they could theoretically do that. And so for the for the address line, there's many reasons why someone would not want their address shared publicly. So I suggest that everyone type in decline unless you're fine with your address being shared. So you can type decline in the address line, still put the city and the zip code if that's a geographic area that feels comfortable to you still to disclose. And that way your lawmakers know like who it is that's contacting them. And then click I'm not a robot and click submit. So if all of you can do that, that will get us like at least 30 to 40 more sign-in pros for a really critical bill tomorrow. So thank you all for participating in this exciting advocacy opportunity. So the second thing I want to ask you all to do, and actually, I think I had three things that I wanted to ask you all to do tonight, but I don't want to go over my time. I feel like I just might do that. So the second and final advocacy ask that I'm going to ask you all to do is to take 3 minutes, and I don't know if any of you have ever done this before, but if you haven't, I'm going to make it really easy for you, and call your lawmaker and leave a message. And here's how I'm going to make it really easy for you. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So, okay. Okay, Laura or someone, can you see my Google Doc here? Okay, cool. So a little bit of context on House Bill 1236. This bill is in the final stage. Like this is the boss level of the video game. I don't know, I don't have any other good metaphors for it, but it has passed all of the other hurdles so far. It has passed out of the House. It's moved on to the Senate. It passed out of the Senate committee. It's moved to the Rules Committee. It got pulled from Rules to the floor. And the last thing that it has to do is pass on the floor of the Senate. And this bill has been introduced 4 legislative sessions in a row. It hasn't even gotten out of its House of Origin except for this legislative session. So this is our opportunity. We really feel like we have momentum this year to pass just cause protections, to keep people housed, to prevent discriminatory evictions from happening. And put the link in the chat. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, so just so everyone can follow on, that's the link to the Google Doc that I'm in right now. And so the final vote on the floor requires all senators to vote yes on this bill. It requires all senators to vote on the bill, right? And the Senate is a little tight in terms of the spread, in terms of who's likely to vote yes and who's likely to vote no. It's not totally on partisan lines, but it follows them pretty closely, especially for controversial tenant bills like this. And Senator Cleveland in the 49th Legislative District in Vancouver is a critical vote on this. We really need her to vote yes. She has been supportive so far. She voted it out of committee in the Housing and Local Government Committee, which we're really, really grateful for. Because you all are in such a critical legislative district, I'm going to ask you all to make a phone call and just let her know how important this bill is to you. And I just, one thing that's important is let's let her know that we really support her. Let's let her know we have her back. Like if if you're able to vote yes on this bill, it will really benefit our communities. It'll benefit renters. It will strengthen our communities and keep folks stably housed. And that's the kind of tone we want to share with this voicemail. So here's how you can do it. The legislative hotline is a very awesome resource. You can just call 1-800-562-6000. And that will take you to a hotline that will be answered by a staff person, and they'll direct you based on where your address and sort of where you're saying you are from. They'll direct you to the proper voicemail box of your lawmaker. And you can say like, I want to speak to, or I want to leave a voicemail for Senator Cleveland. And then here is a script that you all can use. So I recommend structuring the message with sort of like an intro. You can literally use this exact intro here, and then pull one of these talking points. So they're all kind of different, but they're all related to just cause. So you could just pick one that speaks to you. So you could say, dear Senator, my name is blank. I live in your district. I'm calling you to urge you to vote yes on House Bill 1236, enacting just cause protections for tenants. This is a healthcare priority. National research has shown that weakening tenant protections leads to an increase in COVID-19 cases and deaths, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then wrap up with, renters in our district are counting on you to pass the bill in good shape off the Senate floor to prevent a wave of homelessness and to prevent housing discrimination. Please vote yes on House Bill 1236. Thank you. So I'm going to give you all like 3 minutes to just, and it's weird because I can't even tell if you're paying attention right now. I'm just assuming that all of you are. So yeah, so I'm going to give you all 3 minutes. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A if you're like, I'm not sure how to do this or whatever, and we'll make sure to get to those. But take 3 minutes. Please go ahead and call the legislative hotline. Click the link in the chat. And when you're done, since the only way for you to communicate with us is via Q&A, you can ask a question. How awesome am I? I just took action. Action on just cause. And we'll monitor the chat. And I'll tell you how awesome you are if you put a question afterwards. So Laura, I don't know if we have Jeopardy music or anything, but starting now for the next 3 minutes, please go ahead and call your lawmaker and leave a voicemail.
Love it. That's awesome, John. And then in the meantime, we can go through some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A. Looks like Sunny and Jesse have already answered some, and I hope everyone can see it, but if not, I'll just in case, since I'm kind of new to this feature, I'll just recap. Somebody asked about renting a house and the owner has sold the house and notified the renter that they need to move out in May of 2021. Do they have any protections as a tenant? And the answer to that is that possibly. It's always a case-by-case basis, depending on exactly what happened and what notices were provided and when. We have seen some of these come through in the last year, and tenants have been evicted in this situation. However, we have also seen tenants who have avoided being evicted too. I would suggest seeking legal assistance and advice specific to your situation sooner rather than later. And then she gives the phone number for Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program, which is 360-334-4007. And the CLEAR phone number is 888-201-1014. And again, we can get this information shared out as well afterwards. And then somebody else asked if there's a rent assistance flyer available in Spanish, and we are working on getting that translated and hoping to have it ready shortly. We do have a Spanish language portal link, so please feel free to share that widely on our, it's on our website, and we'll update our website with the flyer as soon as it's ready. Council of the Homeless website. Any other questions? I hope those phone calls are going okay. Let us know in the Q&A.
For folks who may be a little intimidated by calling or leaving a voicemail, I'm going to put another action in the chat for you all, which is a sort of an easier one. And that is to send an email to your lawmakers about actually 3 different things, but you can do it in like one click or a couple clicks, but in one location. And that is that we'll send an email to Senator Cleveland or to whatever senator your why can't I say this right? To your senator. It'll send it to your senator about 1236. And to your representatives, it will send an email about Senate Bill 5160 and about the budgets, ensuring that the House capital budget matches the Senate capital budget. So I'll put that in the chat, and if you're already done calling your senator, or if you, feel like this is maybe a little easier, or feels more in your wheelhouse, you'll have that option tonight too.
Awesome. And I see Chelsea called and left a message for Senator Cleveland. Yay, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
And how awesome are you, Chelsea? You are very awesome.
Very awesome. And a brave soul. We appreciate it. And we appreciate the going with the flow here. That's awesome. All right, so John just posted the take action email, and so we're coming up right. We're right at 6:30, and this is when we're hoping that Representative Stonier will be able to join us. While we're waiting, I think I am going to open it up to Q&A, just in general, let's get that going. We'll just start with that and kind of hang out and see if Representative Stonier can join us. And if not, we'll end early, which I think, will be just fine with everybody. But we'll give it a few more minutes here just in case she's able to pop in a little bit in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So let's see. There's a question for Sunny. Is there a way to apply for rental assistance online versus calling in?
Yes, that's a great question. Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback on my end. So that is going to be on if you go to our website, there's a portal link. So there's a Tenant, it says Tenant, then there's one in Spanish. So you are able to grab that link and share it widely. That does actually, it's something you can go now and apply. So it's something that is definitely more accessible for folks. So definitely try that option, share it widely. I believe it is floating around on Facebook and Instagram, a few different places. So it's out there. Definitely please do apply or share that widely. It does seem to be working and spreading very quickly.
Okay, so we have another question about qualifications for the TRAP program from the flyer. I don't know. Does that mean, let's see. Okay, here's a follow-up. Does having received funding last summer or fall disqualify people from this next round? Good question.
That's a great question. That does not, you are not disqualified. So if you received from funding from the emergency rental assistance funding, typically with rental assistance, sometimes the funds will say you can apply one time. That is not the case here. So these are considered separate funding sources. So anyone is able to come back through and apply. We do have there definitely have been a lot of different things at the state level and at the national level of how you qualify. So just so you know, depending on the needs in a specific county, it might look a little bit different. So that will be one piece of going through the screening to see what that looks like. There's income criteria. So 50% of the area median income, it depends on the household size. That would be one piece. Income being impacted by COVID-19. Otherwise, the requirements are pretty simple to meet, but there are some criteria that are in place just so that we can make sure to get the funds quickly out the door and focused on those that are the most in need, but definitely encourage folks to apply.
Awesome. Is there a way for people who don't have computers or phones to inquire about assistance?
Yes, Share actually is, so Share provides, is one of the agencies that is providing this assistance, and they are providing folks the opportunity to walk up to their building off of Andreessen. You can see the details on the flyer. Folks are able to go and apply in person. I don't know off the top of my head the hours, but that is something that is available, again, for folks who are not able to access through other options.
And another question, how long does it take to get approved or denied for rental assistance?
Also a good question. So you are going to pretty quickly see if you're eligible. So that's not going to be something, so that kind of initial screening of seeing if the fund, you would be able to be served by the funding based upon the answers that you're able to provide at that point. I will say, just based upon the sheer, the level of funding as well as the need, it could take some time to actually have a staff member, so say my team, reaching out to say, hey, you put in this application, we want to see kind of what's going on, and start to gather information. So that, just to offer transparency with that, we do not have a timeline. We're going to work as quickly as possible, but we're not able to say immediately what timeline that would look like, just based upon the sheer need, the sheer level of funds that we're working through. So it could be up to a couple of months, several months before we're able to reach out to folks.
Okay, I see someone shared 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at share are the hours. Does that seem right?
Yeah, that does sound right.
All right, any other questions anyone wants to post in the Q&A? I see one more coming in. Just waiting for it to get typed out here. I see you, Judy, if you want to keep going with your question. Had another question come in, is this being recorded? Yes, it is. So we'll send out the recording and put a link to it on our website as well within the next week. All right, Judy, I see you have one more question, but I don't see what the question is.
I see it on there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, for Jesse. So if you're waiting that time frame, a couple of months for assistance, will you help people with negotiating that information to the landlords? That's a good question.
Yeah, this is where the ERP program, the eviction rental assistance program, is going to come in really handy, because the eviction resolution specialists who work there are going to be helping people with kind of this go back and forth between applying for the rental assistance and seeing what assistance the person is successful in getting, and then helping them negotiate with their landlord. We anticipate that there won't be rental assistance for every person that needs it, which is very unfortunate. But this is where it's going to be key for people who are getting rental assistance to seek help negotiating repayment plans with their landlords, whether it's through us or in Northwest Justice Project or Community Mediation Services during the eviction resolution program. We really want to be careful that when people are getting rental assistance money and entering into repayment plans with their landlord, that in an ideal situation, they would have some legal advice before they sign an agreement. This is going to be difficult because there will be time requirements. You know, most things are going to need to happen in a very short amount of time once they've received a notice. But getting in touch with either somebody at my office or somebody at Community Mediation Services to help somebody access the program is going to be the best possible thing that they can do while waiting for the rental assistance application to go through and get approved.
Awesome. Let's see, someone's asking if you have contact info for those people.
I do. Let me put it in the chat.
Okay.
I believe one of them may be here with us as an attendee. So let me grab it and I'll put it in here for us.
Okay. Let's see, another question. Is there an end date for the new TRA funds, such as when will the program end?
Yeah, so currently I believe the contracts extend until December 31st of this year. As Laura mentioned, just sorry, I'm self-muting. So we are expecting, it does appear with the most recent bill that was passed, there are rental assistance dollars attached to that. So again, I don't have an exact time frame, but it does seem that there's recognition that there's ongoing need for assistance. So there's not going to be, yes, there's going to be a push. We know that it is incredibly stressful to have a time frame of, to be transparent, I don't know what it will look like just based upon the sheer need. So we are going to be working as quickly as possible to spend these dollars out, but I am expecting additional funds to come to our communities. Time frame, the original act that passed in May, back in this past May, it ended up coming to our communities in August. So just thinking that context, that time frame of what that looks like. So we'll learn more on what that looks like. I'm sure there will be press releases and information. I'll be learning about that together and what that looks like. But I hope that's helpful. It does seem that there are additional funds coming. Which is definitely exciting and very much needed in the community. I did also notice Terrell's question. There is a portal for landlords and tenants. Yes.
Okay, and then what about, is there a maximum amount that will be allowed per rental assistance request?
So there is a maximum amount of assistance that we can provide. It really depends on the situation itself. There's a limit on how much future rent we're able to assist. I think that essentially press releases went out and said folks are eligible for up to 12 months of assistance. It really depends on how much funding is owed. If you owe previously 12 months of assistance, then we would not be able to provide 12 future months of assistance. I will say that future months of assistance are limited to a maximum of 3 months. So just to let you know, it truly does come down to, as funding is available and what the specific situation is, how much folks owe. So we're seeing folks who owe maybe 1 month because they've been able to maintain, and then some folks who owe since back in March. So again, very dependent, but there is a greater level of assistance that's available with this funding, which is very exciting.
Okay. All right, let's see. Yeah, the landlord portal is now closed, it looks like.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, okay. I've been texting with Representative Stonier, and I don't know if she's going to be able to get on. She says that she might be able to. She's trying to save a bill. And I said, is it a housing bill? She said no. And I was like, okay. So I think I'm going to move us along, and thank you, everybody. I hope we were able to. Oh, somebody asked real quick before we move on. Is there an income limit for help? Another good question.
Yes, it is 50% of the area median income, which seems vague, but it depends on the number of folks in a household. So I don't know if that information, I think that there's information out there, it's gone out there, so you're able to check that. But honestly, call the housing hotline to verify. You are most definitely able to go through that referral process. It walks you through it. So we've tried to make it as accessible as possible. You know, we ask lots of questions about income and different pieces, but it does walk you through it.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us along as we're getting close here to the end of our webinar. So as promised, we have some calls to action, some more calls to action. It's just, you know, so much to do right now. And thank you to everyone who's taken part so far tonight. And we want to keep the momentum going. We are just in this really critical time period in these next few weeks. So I want to just first thank all of our panelists tonight. And, you know, we have a few weeks left of the legislative session. We have an eviction moratorium extension through June. We are sitting on the cusp of, you know, as you've heard, of more rental assistance and homelessness prevention assistance than we've ever seen. And all of this is happening as vaccines are rolling out and things are opening up again. And it appears that we, you know, might be headed down the slow road to some kind of a recovery and normalcy. And it's just so many things converging and things happening that could impact everyone for a long time to come. Like John said earlier, you know, this is really our opportunity to make some lasting changes and protections for folks. For a long time, you know, the pandemic really shone a spotlight on a lot of inequities and, you know, just impacts to different people. You know, there's this saying that we're all in the same boat, you know, and we're in this together. But quite frankly, what we've seen is that we aren't all in the same boat in this pandemic, and yet we are all in it together. And advocacy is a big way that you can be a part of that boat, even if it's, you know, your boat is a little bit safer than others' boats. Okay, enough of that metaphor. So it's been a long day. So Brenda's going to post another link in the chat about signing up to receive our housing advocacy action alerts, and you'll see more information like what John posted earlier about sort of ways to email your legislators, call your legislators, stay up to date on things that are going on. So please sign up for that if you haven't already. And again, I'm just going to repeat it. I think we've hammered it home, but call your legislators, thank your legislators, ask them to continue to vote for housing and homelessness budgets and bills, especially House Bill 1236 for Senator Cleveland. And then, you know, we'll keep you updated throughout our, you know, through the housing advocacy email list with opportunities to continue to do this over the next few weeks. And oftentimes, if things come up even federally after the legislative session ends, you know, we'll send them out through that housing advocacy list as well. That's definitely been something that's been different about this last year, is we've been sending out more action alerts throughout the year because there's been federal opportunities happening as well as state and local. So we can't forget about Governor Inslee for extending the eviction moratorium. This is a contact web form that you can fill out and send to his office. Brenda's gonna also very kindly post that link in the chat. And you know, we've just, I think, heard tonight just how everything is working together to give people time to get back on their feet, you know, for that federal stimulus money to come into the community and take effect, to help people pay back rent, help tenants and landlords get back on their feet. So thank him for extending that moratorium on evictions. The last thing we wanted was for people to be evicted just as, you know, assistance is actually coming into the community. And so that, I think this will help with that quite a bit. And it really does leverage the funds and the policy that's being created right now in the best way to truly provide that safety net for people who need it as we navigate our way through the rest of this pandemic. So we have another webinar coming up on April 20th, and we'd love for you to attend that as well. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about our annual system numbers for 2020, which is sort of the entire year-long snapshot of what the picture of, you know, need is and people who've accessed services in our community over the last year. It's a much more comprehensive, descriptive picture of homelessness in Clark County and what we've been, who we've been serving and who's been calling and asking for help. So, so that'll be April 20th, and Brenda will post the registration link for that webinar in the chat as well. Let me check in on some Q&A, make sure we've got everything. Yep, looks like we're still good in the Q&A. And with that, I just want to thank you all for attending tonight, and I'll leave you with our regular calls to action, which is, please share the information you've learned. And as we always say, be kind, share data, dispel myths, reduce stigma, and stay tuned. We're going to do more webinars each month throughout this next year. And I just want to really thank our panelists and our attendees tonight. And I hope you all have a great evening, and I'll give you back about 10 minutes of your night tonight. So thank you again, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a great evening.